Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Good evening, everyone, to the Committee of the Whole meeting for June 18, 2025. The first thing is to call to the order to the meeting. Please stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, roll call, please.
Mayor Radafrada?
Here.
Alder Dantzler?
Here.
Excellent. Alder Gerhard?
Here.
Alder Herbst?
Is
absent with excuse?
Yes.
Excellent. Alder Jetzer?
Here.
Alder Lattice?
Here.
Alder Maldonado? Absent with
I don't know.
absent?
Absent.
Alder Regstad?
He is delayed.
And Alder Vafadari?
She is absent with excuse.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next, we are moving to item 4, approval of minutes. So I need a motion.
I move to approve the May 28th meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Was second, but are there her. So any comments, question? No? Okay. All those in favor of approving the May 28th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. So next we move to item 5, public expediency for non-agenda items. It seems that we don't have anyone in the chamber nor online. So we move into item 6, is agenda items. And tonight we have 2 items in our agenda. One is going to be the financial management plan, and the second is going to be the police department reorganization. So first we are going to start with the financial management plan. Misty Dodge, our finance director, is here. She's going to do an introduction, and then we have Greg Johnson from Ehlers, our consulting firm. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much for an introduction.
Oh, no.
This is an annual process we go through, and then I will turn it over to Greg. Thank you so much for being here, Greg.
So he's connected. Okay.
Good evening. Pleasure to be here this evening. As Misty mentioned, this is the annual update to the city's financial management plan. Really, the purpose of this plan is to look at the city's finances over a multi-year period, not only your existing operational costs to maintain your current day-to-day services, but it also incorporates your capital improvement plan, models out existing and future debt, and we'll look at trends in the city's overall tax levy and tax rate, look at levy limit compliance over the planning period, and really it's kind of part of a kickoff to your annual budget process to kind of look at how things are trending financially over a multi-year period. So this has really been part of the city's ongoing financial management practices for many years. This is a recommended best practice from the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA. that recommends that communities do a multi-year forecast, so look at both operational and capital trends. It's also beneficial when the city goes through its rating process with Moody's when it issues debt. We always highlight that the city goes through a financial management plan annually. So it's a good best practice to help guide day-to-day decisions and also share that information with third-party entities that are interested in the village's long-term financial trends. The city has several financial policy guidelines. We recently revised those and updated those and presented those to Common Council last month. But just to kind of restate some of those key policy metrics within those guidelines. First is general fund balance. The guideline is that your unassigned general fund balance will be at a minimum between 15 to 25% of total general fund revenues. In terms of some metrics related to debt service, your tax rate for debt service will not exceed $2.25 per thousand, and then your gross expense for general obligation debt service will be in a range of 15 to 25% of total expenditures, defined as including the general fund, library, transit, and debt service expenditures combined. So we'll look at each of those metrics in terms of how they are trending over the 10-year planning horizon. Some other financial policy guidelines are related to your general obligation debt outstanding. While there's a statutory limit in terms of the amount of general obligation debt that can be outstanding, the city has a kind of an internal metric that it will not exceed 3% of total equalized value, or another way of looking at that metric, that at no time the city will utilize more than 60% of its statutory borrowing authority. And then one of the financial guidelines that was added to this year was related to the enterprise funds or the utility funds of the city, and that's a cash on hand metric that shall maintain at least 250 days of unrestricted cash on hand. So in terms of just general financial compliance with those specific guidelines, in terms of general fund balance at the end of 2024, your most recent audited financial statements, the unassigned general fund balance was at 15.14% of general fund revenues. In terms of the debt tax rate per thousand over the 10-year planning model, the equalized tax rate for debt service does not exceed $1.02 per thousand. The gross debt expense metric over the 10-year planning period, the gross debt expense does not exceed 22%. And then in terms of the general obligation debt outstanding, the highest utilization of your geo debt capacity is 28%. So you're well within, the ranges or the not to exceed recommended levels for each of the policy metrics within your guidelines based on this 10-year plan. Just to speak to a few of those in more detail, here's a chart that just shows the unassigned general fund balance as a percent of total revenue over the last 5 fiscal years. You'll see some notes down at the bottom. That percentage of 15.14% at the end of 2024 was due to planned use of one-time capital, using fund balance on one-time capital projects, which is generally permitted as a recognized use of unassigned fund balance by rating agencies and other general financial standards. So that was kind of planned in advance and disclosed to the rating agencies during the last rating call. So this has always been one of the city's healthy and stable financial metrics. It's also one of the financial metrics that the city has really the most control over in terms of making sure that you adhere to within those ranges within your policy guidelines. So this has long been a fiscal point of strength for the city. In terms of the gross debt service expense, so kind of looking at the 10-year planning model that we have with proposed debt service for projects identified in the capital improvement plan to be funded with debt. So again, the policy metric is between 15 and 25%. So you're basically kind of leveling out at about 22% over the 10-year planning model, including future debt issuance. In terms of the new guidelines for the utility enterprise funds for days cash on hand, based on the most recent audited financial statement, the water utilities at 974 days of unrestricted cash on hand, sewer utility at 350 days, and the stormwater utility at 576 days. So that metric that was established in your policy guidelines was based off of Moody's recommended minimum days cash on hand for a AAA rated entity. So while you don't have any specific revenue debt that is backed by utility revenues exclusively, that would have a separate rating from the city's GO rating. We did use the same AAA metric that's in place for your GO rating and applied it to the days cash on hand metric for the utility. So all three are in good shape in terms of that new metric.
Greg, is there such a thing as a recommended maximum for any of this stuff?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think, if you're well kind of over that minimum amount that we establish in your policy metrics, that just kind of shows that you have strong liquidity. I mean, similar to your general fund balance, as you look at cash and the utilities, it provides an opportunity to, pay for capital with cash on hand, or to, certainly reduce, need for borrowing. There has not been a lot of borrowing for the utilities over the years. So, it's certainly a good metric and just gives you that same flexibility that your fund balance does on the enterprise funds.
I have another question. So how do we compare this number with other municipality that they are the same size of ours? Because you tell me 972 days, but how do I relate it to what? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't have any exact metrics for maybe some of your other comparable communities. I mean, the benchmark we chose was kind of based off of Moody's. Public Service Commission on the water utility side also looks at days on hand, cash on hand metrics, as well as the American Public Works and Water Association. So it's a common metric, different of those entities and sources. They may look at kind of different thresholds, but you're in a strong liquid and cash position for all of the utilities. Okay. Next, we're going to turn our attention to our valuation projections. These will come into play when we look at later in the presentation the city's total tax levy going forward and what the projected tax rate is per thousand. So on the top half of the spreadsheet, this refers to equalized or market value that's certified by the Department of Revenue annually in August of each year. We show a kind of a 5-year trend of your growth in your TID-out equalized value. This is the valuation that's used to determine your tax rate for your general fund and your other operating and capital funds that have levy support. So that's broken down by the amount of that growth due to economic change, the portion that's attributable to net new construction, which has levy limit implications that we'll speak to in a few minutes. And then the other category historically has been adjustments and personal property, but as of January 1st of 2024 for the 2025 budget, all personal property was exempt from taxation in Wisconsin. So that's why you'll see that large deduct in 2025, and that other category, 2025 budget year, that was replaced with personal property aid payments to the cities. That comes in the form of an aid payment versus part of your property tax rate calculation. So in terms of our methodology of what we're using to kind of forecast growth, we're deliberately being conservative. We're basically taking your 5-year trend and discounting that by 50%, or taking half. So we're projecting approximately 8% growth in your valuation in this model. Over the 10-year planning period, there's been several TIDs that have been closed in the city within the past couple of years, but there presently aren't any planned to close within that 10-year planning horizon. So it's really just projecting your existing tax base at a growth rate of about 8% annually, which is conservative. We work with Misty to kind of develop the operating methodology for the city's operating funds. We've kind of summarized the key components of that methodology on this chart. Most of the city's non-levy revenue sources are generally remain flat. I mean, that's public charges for services, licenses and permits, fines, things of that nature. That's very consistent with what we see in most communities in Wisconsin year over year. In terms of some increases, we built in shared revenue, which is your primary intergovernmental aid from the state. We're showing that projecting at about 2% annually. Your recreational charges are increasing at the same percentage as your expenditures to help those charges and fees cover the costs of those programs. And then your internal charges that you have for your utilities and library for kind of dispersing the share of those operational costs are trending at about 5% per year to kind of coincide with expenditures. In terms of the general fund methodology, most of the wage-driven departments are increasing by about 5% per year, or those wage-driven line items. Other expenditures are increasing in a range of about 3 to 4%. And then there are allowances kind of within the model for staffing expenditures to increase to kind of reflect the operating impact of the capital improvement plan. So those are estimates kind of to be updated. Again, want to emphasize really the purpose of the financial management plan is to look at long-term trends. So we're trying to be conservative and certainly forecast a complete picture of your overall budgetary obligations, but also understand that you'll have the opportunity to look at things on a more detailed basis as you go through your annual budget deliberations. But this kind of sets kind of some initial trends long term. So in terms of the general fund summary, which really kind of incorporates your existing services, this just kind of shows that projection based on that methodology that I just summarized. So we're really showing a balanced budget going forward, just for conservative planning purposes. So this kind of shows your main revenue sources in your general fund by the major categories, and then expenditures, while broken down by department on this chart. We've just summarized them by general function of government. So general government, public works, public safety, et cetera. So really kind of shows within the model that your change in expenditures is averaging about 4.15% increase year over year in this model based on the conservative methodology that we've used. In terms of the library fund, this is another one of your levy component, levy funded areas within your budget. So the model really illustrates the impact of a levy increase that's tied to net new construction. So when we talk about levy limits, your base levy can increase by that percentage increase in net new construction from the prior year. And then there are permitted adjustments, which I'll speak to in a few minutes. But really what this model shows that by 2030, the library expenditures are projected to outpace kind of that percentage growth in net new construction per year. So just kind of indicates like other departments, this library fund as well will kind of need to take, levy limit considerations into account. So the expenditures here don't take into account, capital projects which are funded by equipment replacement. This is primarily operational forecast.
I have a question. What do you mean that by year 2030 we need to take levy limit consideration?
So when we kind of look at really kind of the balance here kind of going forward, we're kind of projecting that you're going to have a year-end deficit in 2030. So the levy in this model is basically increasing by what we're forecasting for net new construction increases under levy limits, which is a 3% annual increase. So if that levy increases 3%, but your operational expenditures are trending at a higher amount, it just shows that the fund would have a deficit by 2030. So, the pace of expenditures is outpacing what we're projecting your allowable levy increase would be under levy limits. And that's represented by kind of the year-end deficit by the end of 2030.
Okay, because the deficit started in 2025. The issue is we are using the reserve to cover for that deficit.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm referring to when the year-end balance goes deficit. Mm-hmm. In terms of your transit fund, this was incorporated into your levy a couple budget cycles ago. So we're kind of again projecting what's necessary to arrive at a balanced budget for the transit fund. So that kind of shows how those the property tax levy, and then you have other revenues related to the transit fund that really are the primary revenue stream to pay for ongoing expenditures within the district. So this fund is partially funded by levy support and shows kind of that property tax levy trending. So we'll look at the total levy in a few minutes in terms of the impact, but right now we're just breaking down the various levy components within your budget.
Greg, why is the local property tax, why does that dip in 2026?
So I can answer that for a little bit if you'd like. So these numbers were based on information we got from Metro, I think last year, maybe the year before that we had continued out. The property tax amount is basically just the difference between what Metro expects to bill us versus how much state aid we expect to get. And then property taxes just backfills it.
Oh, sorry. Is the non-levy revenue sources is the transportation aid that we receive, or is the
that is the state grant
the state
that
grant.
we receive?
Okay.
Yep, specifically for transit.
So next we're going to transition into debt service and look at kind of the impact of on the property tax levy to fund projects identified to be funded through debt in the city's capital improvement plan. Before we look at future debt issuance, this chart summarizes the city's present levy for debt service. So on the far left-hand side is your existing general obligation principal and interest payments. Then the city has some other expenditures that are typically budgeted in its debt service fund, just related to overall management and reporting requirements for its existing debt outstanding. And then the city budgets some non-levy revenue sources to pay a portion of the existing debt service. So those main revenue sources consist of increment from TID number 9, 10, and 13. So when debt is issued for projects that benefit a TIF district, increment from those districts can pay the debt service. And so that reduces what needs to be levied to pay your total principal and interest annually. And then the city has been budgeting some impact fees for fire services. And then premium amounts refer to funds from prior debt issues. Typically, a premium is money that gets deposited into a debt service fund to help pay future interest expense, which is a requirement of state law. So in that net tax levy column, that really shows what your levy is for debt service going forward. So in the 2025 budget, your levy for debt service was $5,615,700. Showing that levy, declining going forward, but this is before we look at the impact of adding new debt for proposed capital projects. In terms of the methodology that we've used to kind of put together a multi-year debt issuance model for all the projects in the CIP proposed to be funded with debt. In terms of the larger facility improvement projects that are identified in that CIP, the debt service is amortized over 20 years. For projects that are applicable to a TIF district, the debt service is amortized over the maximum life of that TIF district. And then all the other projects proposed to be funded with debt are amortized over 10 years.
When you say maximum life of the TID, it's not the actual life of the TID because we don't know that at the time we create it, right?
So for example, and we'll kind of look at this chart that kind of summarizes your capital projects, and I'll pick a TIF district as an example. So this project down here, the Lacey Seminole Regional Stormwater Project, which is located in TID district number 9, that district can collect increment until 2036. So we're showing that debt service would be amortized out till 2036. Debt issues typically have a call feature, so if the TID district is overperforming and that district can close early, oftentimes debt can be prepaid early, but we make conservative conservatively structure the debt over the maximum revenue collection period just to increase the likelihood that the increment will be sufficient to cover the debt. So for some of the other TID districts, for example, so there are projects in TID 14, that the final year of increment collection for that district is in 2043. So we're looking at the increment collection period to determine, when the last payment for debt can be.
Okay, and then we have the option of keeping each of them open one additional year for the Affordable Housing Fund, right?
That is correct. So once a TID district has reached sufficient fund balance to pay off all of its obligations, you have the ability under state law to collect an additional year's worth of increments. 75% of that has to be set aside for affordable housing, which the TIF statutes describe as a housing that doesn't cost more than 30% of a household's gross monthly income. The other 25% can be for general housing stock improvements. That gets set aside in a separate fund, and that money can be spent anywhere within the city. It has no correlation to the actual TID district that funded that. The TID's the mechanism to collect the money. You can then spend it anywhere within the city. So in this chart, this is just a summary of the capital projects that are proposed to be funded from debt in the city's CIP. So we have the specific project name, the general department, the project tracking ID, and then in the issue term and repayment column, it just shows the year that the project is being financed. The number refers to the amortization term of the debt, and then what follows is the repayment source for the debt. So for this first project, the police facility addition, that's funded in 2026 with general obligation notes, 20-year amortization, debts repaid by the levy. So there's, most of the debt is proposed repaid by the levy. Some of this is applicable to TID districts or revenue anticipated from sewer assessments. So those are primarily the other revenue sources pledged to repay debt. So when we look at all of those debt issues from 2026 out through 2035, we've kind of estimated the gross principal and interest for those future debt issues. The abatements column that represents the non-levy revenue sources, TID revenue, sewer assessment revenue that's going to repay their proportional share of the debt service. And then in the debt service levy column, this shows what the total levy would be for debt service, taking into account your existing debt, plus all the proposed debt service for projects from 2026 to 2035. So since there's a larger financing in 2026 due to the continuation of the police facility in that particular year, that's driving a larger levy increase. If that's funded in 26, that hits the levy in 2027. But then the remaining debt service payments were structured so the debt service levy would increase about $530,000 per year. The levy drops in 2037 because the end of our planning model is in 2035. If you added another year, that next round of projects would be financed in 2036, which would hit the levy in 2037. So we're building a decline in to kind of account for the end of our planning period. So I want to emphasize that this is, based on full funding of every project in the CIP. The city annually updates that document, prioritizes projects, but we just take that list and build everything into the model. So I want to make sure that's understood. So in terms of, again, one of the financial guidelines that you have in your policies is that your tax rate per thousand just for debt should not exceed $2.25. We're showing that the highest it would reach in this 10-year planning model is $1.02 per thousand. So in this far right-hand column, this just shows for every $330,000 of value, how much the annual portion of the tax bill would just be attributable to debt. So that's what's shown in this far right-hand column. We're going to look at the total levy impact in a few minutes. One of your other financial guidelines is your general obligation debt capacity utilization. So under state law, your total principal of general obligation debt cannot exceed 5% of the city's total TID-in equalized value, all taxable property within the city. Your own policy guidelines say that you will not, exceed 3% or exceed 60% of your debt utilization. So you'll see with everything shown as being fully funded in the CIP, if that were to occur, your geodebt utilization wouldn't exceed about 28%. So you're well under your benchmarks that you've established in your financial guidelines. So really this is as much of a legal standard as it is as a financial one, but the city has more than adequate borrowing capacity to fund capital projects. It's really more about the fiscal impact. So next we'll transition to kind of the multi-year budget forecast. Again, this includes all aspects of your budget that are funded by the levy. So I went through several of them individually. So we have your general fund, the library, transit. A portion of your capital projects are funded through kind of reserves that are built up through your levy for capital outlay. So that'll be factored into the multi-year forecast as well as your existing and proposed debt service. So again, the capital plan incorporates borrowing for all the projects in the 10-year CIP. So again, understanding that that'll go through continuous reviews, but for now, everything's been included in the model. Some of the debt, again, is supported by non-levy revenue sources, primarily TIF. And really the intent is, again, to illustrate kind of the long-term impact of capital and operations combined. So just in terms of kind of keeping this multi-year model into kind of context from a planning perspective, again, this is really looking at kind of existing service levels within your operational departments, ongoing continuation of those. As I've said multiple times, full funding of the CIP, both from a debt perspective and those projects funded with the tax levy. So really this, as the city goes through its annual budget process, the city, continues its prioritization and review of service levels within various departments and, makes budgetary decisions to remain in compliance with levy limits. So this is kind of a full funding model of everything I just articulated, understanding that you're going to make those adjustments and as you go through your annual budget process. So it's kind of a preview of kind of a multi-year trend. So in terms of, how the city, annually goes through the budget process, the city routinely, follows all of these general objectives. You're trying to, look certainly at your total levy and tax rate, the impact on taxpayers, but also understanding how that correlates to service delivery methods, both for your existing services and any changes for new services or initiatives. Your development of your 10-year capital improvement plan, ongoing capital prioritization, balancing investment of infrastructure with acceptable levels of debt. And then as we spoke to, in 2024, you use fund balance for, one-time capital projects, which is an appropriate use of fund balance. So the city has a strong history and track record of kind of incorporating all of this guidance, but just want to understand that that's really kind of where you go from here in terms of your annual budget process and kind of looking at things as you get ready for 2026. So next, we'll kind of look at that multi-year projection. So we kind of have this chart broken down into kind of a couple different years. So we show 2024 budget, actual, and then 2025 budget, and then projections are going forward. So you'll see, just to kind of summarize what's in this chart, we have your total levy. That includes all levy support to all of your funds. So that's operations in the general fund, library, transit, capital, and debt service, existing and proposed. And so then we show the total percentage change in the total levy year over year. We show your projected growth in equalized value. Again, from 2026 and beyond, we're projecting, just about 8% growth in your equalized value. And then we show what your tax rate is per thousand. So for example, in the 2024 budget, just for the city, it was $5.81 per thousand. In 2025, it was $5.46 per thousand. And then we just show for every $330,000 in value, how much is paid in city taxes alone. So again, this is just the city portion of the tax bill. And then we continue that same summary out from 2030 all the way out until 2035. So again, kind of shows how things are trending with all your existing services continuing to be funded, accounting for increases in costs going forward over time, and full funding of all the projects identified in the capital plan for levy support or through debt service. So to take all of this, numerical information and just kind of present it graphically. So this chart shows that, your tax levy is in the orange bars, so shows how that's projected to change from 2024 all the way out through 2035. And then the blue line represents the tax rate per thousand. So that kind of shows, over time that the tax rate is kind of gradually declining. Again, that's only based off of about 8% annual growth in the tax base going forward. So this takes all that same information, the detailed charts that show the various levy components and the total tax rate, and just represents it, that same information graphically.
Hey, Greg, can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
So mostly for the public, but it's interesting that the tax rate is dropping. And so is it fair to say that that's because our property values are increasing at a faster rate than what our levy is allowed to increase due to levy limits?
That's correct. And I think that's really been a trend that's been fairly pronounced statewide over the past couple of years. It's more beneficial in terms of kind of on the operational side and the debt side, where that proposes maybe some different challenges is on the Taxicomel district side. So as, the tax rate for TID districts, is made up of all the taxing jurisdictions, city, county, school districts, and the technical college. Both counties and cities operate under levy limits, and so generally those levy limit increases for many years now have been at a percentage that is less than what most communities have seen in terms of their tax-based growth. I mean, in a lot of communities over the last couple of years, we've seen double-digit percentage increases in their tax base, but percentage increase year over year of their levy at a much smaller percentage. So as that, not to talk fractions, but let's talk fractions. So you take the numerator and the denominator, as the denominator gets bigger and the numerator grows at a lesser rate. That's how that's kind of why that tax rate is declining. So I'll stop with the fractions.
I want to mention something, Misty, that you mentioned to me when we were putting together the CIP, that, the actual projected equalized tax rate, that one is the mill rate, isn't it? So in this case, it's like under $5. So it's going to affect our expenditure restraint program, isn't it?
Correct. So one of the initial qualifications to be eligible for that expenditure restraint incentive payment is you have to have a mill rate or an equalized mill rate of at least $5.
Yeah.
So yep, we expect that we'll fall below that in the relatively close future.
So we can lose that.
Correct.
Money.
And in the meantime, it's going to keep going down and down and down and down. It's like the amount that we received, 3 years ago is much less than the amount that I expect we'll receive next year.
And while that's, certainly a, legitimate, revenue consideration going forward, one way the city can somewhat hedge against that is that the city uses its expenditure restraint revenue to fund capital projects. So not that that's not a concern, that represents less funding for capital projects, but it would be a worse situation to be in if you're using that for operations, because then that revenue would just go away and you might not have the ability to recapture that.
Yeah, I get it. That one is a good strategy, yeah.
Yep, and so we're following that best practice currently.
Yeah.
So speaking of levy limits, just to, again, kind of recap the city's various components of its levy: general fund, library, transit, capital, and debt. All those components are subject to levy limits except general obligation debt. So there's a permitted adjustment on the levy limit worksheet that you can legally, under levy limits, raise your levy by whatever amount necessary to repay your debt service. And that's important because general obligation debt is legally backed by an irrepealable tax levy. So it kind of stands to reason that you wouldn't be restricted to levy the amount necessary to repay your debt. That's why general obligation debt generally results in the lowest interest rate for a form of financing for capital projects. So in terms of levy limits, I've mentioned this a few times, but in terms of, the actual statutes, so what the statute says is that your actual levy from the prior year can be increased by a percentage equal to net new construction in the preceding year. So every year in August, the Department of Revenue publishes the net new construction percentages for every community in the state. Then you're allowed to increase your levy by permitted adjustments identified in the levy limit statutes. We mentioned the permitted adjustment for debt, which the city regularly claims, which is very common throughout the state. And then other adjustments the city uses as they're applicable. So there's an adjustment for allowable increases in costs for joint fire and EMS departments if they are under a certain cap that's recalculated annually. There's an adjustment to increase your allowable levy for rescinded taxes. And then if you have changes in intergovernmental agreements that readjust the formula for each community's proportional share of that service, there could be increases or decreases on the levy limit worksheet for that as well. So the city routinely kind of annually looks at its permitted adjustments on the levy limit worksheet to kind of see what's applicable, debt being the constant. The city's claiming what it needs for debt service every year on the worksheet. So how has the city managed levy limits? Levy limits have been in place in 2005, since 2005, so it's been a minute. They've been around a while. As I've mentioned, the city does a good job of prioritizing capital projects in your existing services, looking to make sure you're getting the most efficient services for your residents and your businesses within the community. When the city has closed taxable finance districts over the past couple of years, under the levy limit statutes, you're allowed to increase your allowable levy the year following the TID closure. So the city has taken advantage of that as well. When I say taking advantage of it, it doesn't mean it just increased the levy because it could. It's a favorable adjustment to claim because it builds your carryover levy capacity year over year. So it just kind of resulted in the city managing what other adjustments it took. When the city absorbed portions of the town of Madison, there was a one-time levy limit adjustment to account for some of those increase in costs. And then you've used the increases in shared revenue to help cover costs for existing services. So here's kind of the detail behind the levy limit worksheet. I usually don't go through this in detail because there's a lot of math and a lot of numbers here, but I'll just point out kind of some key numbers. So first, there's some of the TID closures. So this kind of shows over the last 3 fiscal years, the city's been able to increase its allowable levy due to TID closures. We have your net new construction percentages. The first 3 are actuals, and then we're projecting about 3% going forward. So again, and then there's other adjustments, as I mentioned, several of them, the debt being most commonly used, and then the city's taken other adjustments as they've qualified for joint fire and EMS departments, for example. So conservatively going forward, what we've projected from a levy limit perspective is for 26 budget through the end of the planning model, we've only accounted for the city taking its adjustment permitted for debt service. There may be other adjustments that you qualify for in a given fiscal year. You may qualify for an adjustment one year, not qualify it for the next. So everything has to be looked at on an annual basis. But we're kind of projecting, kind of a levy limit shortfall in 2026, and then that gradually increases. This isn't necessarily new when we've kind of presented this model on an annual basis. Again, it's kind of an all-in look, full funding of CIP, kind of, full continuation of existing services going forward. So typically when we've presented this, kind of at the beginning of your budget deliberations for the next fiscal year, for the past several years, we've kind of identified a levy limit shortfall, and then for all the strategies that I've mentioned throughout the presentation, the city goes through and looks for ways to kind of manage that gap. So, that is continuing to be a challenge is really the message, I want to communicate going forward. So the city has found ways to continue that, but if you look to expand existing services, Going forward, it's, you're likely going to see continued pressures under levy limits to meet increased service demands. And so when we, look at that over out over a 10-year planning period, that deficit starts, to grow and increase over time. And we've also reduced the net new construction percentage from 2030 to 2035 down to 2%, just to be a little more conservative. So this is really one of the benefits of going through this exercise on an annual basis. You can see how things are trending, kind of know where you stand in terms of levy limit flexibility or areas where we're seeing pressure, and so you have the opportunity to address that and react to that when you kind of go through your budget process. So again, it's kind of a continued trend, but also something the city needs to monitor. And again, this is just based off of existing services. So to the extent that you want to see significant expansions in services, that's going to present some challenges from an operating budget perspective. So in terms of just some high-level summaries of the multi-year budget forecast, so the levy change, the annual increase from 2025 to 2035 is 5.32%. So that's your total levy, operations, debt, and capital. The larger increase in 2027 is due to a large capital financing anticipated to occur in 2026, where there's 49 million of projects in that particular year. So I mean that's kind of what's driving that larger increase in 27. I summarized the policy guidelines, that you've established within your parameters and your policy framework. All of those, the model is in compliance with, but we again do see that levy limit gaps kind of continue to persist in the model going forward. So that's kind of the overview of the financial management plan. Again, kind of establishes kind of an initial framework to kind of use as you start going through your annual budget process, to just kind of see how things are trending with continuation of existing services, full funding of the capital improvement plan, monitoring your financial benchmarks, and then looking at levy limits as well. So that's the formal part of the presentation. I'm happy to take questions if there are any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Greg, if you can tell, because there are going to be people watching this meeting, how is the financial health of the city today? Because there's, some people are talking that we are, expending more money than we should, and that the city financially is in bad shape. This is the comment that I am, So if you had to, according to what you see,
The city is in a strong and stable financial position. That's evidenced by your rating that you have from Moody's, which is AAA, the highest rating you can have. I've mentioned some of your financial strengths. I mean, you have good fund balance levels and reserves. It's important for communities to have reserves and financial liquidity to kind of react to certain circumstances. I mean, we commonly hear, well, if a community has a lot of reserves, shouldn't all that money just go back to taxpayers? But you're running a continuous operation. I mean, unless the city merged and just didn't continue going forward, the city is going to continue to exist going forward. So you need to look long term and make sure you've got strong reserves to react to changing circumstances, whatever they may be. In terms of kind of your spending levels and kind of your where you're trending with kind of your services. Again, I mean, I think the city, and you had these discussions when you were kind of going through your levy limit referendum discussions, you're tying your levy and your tax dollars to specific service delivery and certain changes in service delivery or certain positions that are going to provide certain services. That's really the best practice to kind of make decisions from a financial standpoint. Local government's in the service delivery business. That's what you do here on a daily basis. And so trying to correlate how you're investing those resources in terms of day-to-day services, but also making the investment in your capital improvement plan to maintain infrastructure and strike that balance. most communities aren't funding everything they want to fund. They're trying to strike that appropriate mix of investment in infrastructure and investment in day-to-day services. In terms of, some of the levy limit pressures, the city is not unique in that regard either. As I mentioned, levy limits have been in place for 20 years. And generally, particularly, the last few years, the pace of inflation has outpaced the percentage increases into, due to net new construction that guides how much you can increase your levy. And so as your costs are outpacing how you can grow your primary revenue source, that's what's kind of pushing some, putting some pressures. So, in summary, I think the city's in good financial position. I think you're like many communities, you're trying to find stable revenue sources that provide the level of services that you want to maintain and provide to your residents, but you have to do that under limitations within state law.
Okay, so can you put the page number 30 on the screen? I need to ask you a question about that. So we look at it for the 2026 budget, we are already anticipated a deficit, and we have not even started. So a deficit of more than $500,000, okay? This is if we have the existing, with not adding any new services or anything. So if I look at this, the only way that I can reduce that is reducing the debt service. This is the only thing that I can control. Because we are, so this is one of the options to reduce that debt service, isn't it?
You can reduce debt service to kind of reduce your overall total levy. But again, debt service let's talk about two things.
Oh, I get it. It's not part of the levy.
Yeah, so it's exempt from your levy limit gap. So it can, that can help reduce your overall levy increase. It's not going to help you from a levy limit perspective because it's already exempt from levy limits.
You want to add something?
I guess the one thing I would add is that, as Greg mentioned, this is everything funded using very broad stroke kind of assumptions, right? And so us going into the budget with $500,000 levy limit gap is scary, but not terrifying, right? So I think it does mean that we will struggle to add any new things, new staff, new services, new that stuff will be a significant challenge.
I think we did
but I
it last
am
year
hopeful.
Too,
I am hopeful that we can at least maintain our kind of status quo using different strategies and prioritization.
Okay, so question, people. This is your opportunity. I want questions. Bill.
So some of the metrics you had on there, the denominator was the equalized value. Has that ever gone down? Like, I don't know, financial crisis of 2007-8. Did that, if we're sitting at 15.1% and everything crashes and suddenly, we're back down to $4.8 billion of total equalized value, we're going to be blowing through our limit there. And is that even a thought on anybody's radar? Should it be?
I think the short answer is your equalized value can go down, but I doing this from memory, that I don't believe during those economic downturns the city ever saw its equalized value actually decline. But that has occurred for other communities in Wisconsin.
We did a little bit, $100 million in those couple of years, but I wouldn't say that was devastating to us at that point. But to kind of piggyback, that's part of why we have those ranges in our financial policies, why we have guidelines, why we have those guidelines where they are, so that we can weather some of those storms as long as they aren't catastrophic.
Any other question? Yes, Logan.
Well, first of all, Greg, thanks for making the time, and my apologies for being late. The library board meeting ran a lot longer than I expected tonight. Wanted to flash back to slide 28, the levy limits at a glance. I'm looking at the last bullet point where it says other adjustments used, if applicable, include joint fire EMS, rescinded taxes, and changes to intergovernmental agreements. I'm just wondering, as a newer council member, if you could help me kind of wrap my head around that as we look at changes to the overall structure of our agreement with Verona and Town of Verona regarding EMS and fire.
Sure. So let's
EMS.
take that one as the example, since that's the question you asked. So there's a permitted adjustment on the levy limit worksheets for changes. That service is kind of governed through an intergovernmental agreement. So within that intergovernmental agreement, there's a formula that kind of derives how the costs are split between all the municipal partners within that joint service. If all the entities, through a revision of that intergovernmental agreement, adjust the formula that changes the proportional cost to each community, if let's just say there's community A and community B, to keep it simple. If communities A's costs go up as a result of that formula change, you can claim that amount of that increase to community A's levy can go up, but communities B has to reduce their levy by that same amount. And so when communities file their levy limit worksheets, DOR in that instance is looking for a corresponding increase from community A and a decrease from community B. So that's how that is applicable. There's another adjustment, that the city has been able to claim for, joint fire and EMS, where if the total charges from one year to the next, not to Fitchburg specifically, but the total charges levied to all the members of the department, if that increases by less than 2% plus, or less than, I'm forgetting the formula at the top.
CPI plus 2%.
Thank you. Thanks. I was going to say that, was questioning it. If it increases by that amount or less than that amount, you can claim that adjustment. But that's an annual calculation. So if it's more one year, you can't claim the adjustment. If it's under that threshold, the next you can. So the city has claimed those when it's in compliance.
Any other question, comment? I have another question that, I don't know, that the House Budget Committee is considering what is going to happen with the muni bonds. We don't know yet what is going to happen in the Senate, in the big, beautiful bill. So if that is repealed, all of this that you presented here, it can change, isn't it? The interest rate.
Yeah, let me put that into a little bit of context. So, Mayor, so what you're referring to is presently communities, when you finance capital projects, if you're financing general public improvements, as you typically do, streets, infrastructure, facilities, that qualifies for tax-exempt debt under the IRS tax code, which results in lower interest rates to the city, but reduces taxable, income that is collected by the U.S. Treasury for federal government purposes. So what has been discussed at various times over the years is that tax exemption for public infrastructure going away, which doesn't mean you can't finance those projects. It just means you would finance it on a taxable basis, which would increase your interest rates. So far, there, in terms of kind of the routine types of tax-exempt financings for infrastructure that the city typically would undertake, that provision is still, being preserved so far. There's a lot of education that goes on by various municipal groups and public utility groups to help, federal legislators understand the benefit of that tax exemption. Because if that goes away and you still finance infrastructure, you may finance less, but it's just going to drive up the costs at the local level. And so that's, so far that's still intact, but yes, if that changes, that's your debt service payments would increase.
Gabriela.
Thanks. I just wanted to remind everybody, well, I guess two things. First, it's something I didn't realize my first year going through the CIP process was that what ends up in 2026 for the CIP at the end of our process, at the end of the amendments, is typically what's put directly into the 2026 budget. So that 1 year has a lot more consequence in terms of the finances of the city than any other amendments throughout other different years. Although the mayor can obviously make changes before her proposed budget comes out. And if she does make changes from the final CIP for 2026, she calls that out specifically in the letter about what has changed from the final CIP process. I think that's notable. And then the second thing is that next week on Monday, we have a special finance committee meeting at 6 p.m. where we are going to discuss the CIP in depth. The department heads will do presentations about the different CIP projects. Highly recommend it. It's really important. It's a really great way to get the overview of the document and kind of get some ideas about what you might like to see changed, if anything. So highly recommend. Again, that's next Monday, this coming Monday, June 23rd, 6 p.m.
Thank you. Misty, do you want to say something?
Yep. So Greg's presentation tonight, thank you so much for sharing it. I will post it out on the city's website tomorrow.
Okay.
So it'll be available to council as well as the public.
Okay, thank you. Any other final comment? Micah, yes.
Hey, yeah, thank you. I appreciate this. I really appreciate being able to see the 10-year projections. That's really helpful. Just the one only small comment I have is that if maybe in like future years as we do this, if we could adjust the like typical Fitchburg house size, it's currently at $330,000. It's just kind of hard I like seeing that number at the average level house. So we can say this is how it affect the average level house. And that just crossed 500,000 in the last assessment. So it'd just be nice to see that updated. But thanks. I really appreciate everything else though. Thanks.
Yeah, that one is, I saw that too. Any other questions, comments? Here none. Thank you very much, Greg.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so next we are moving to the second presentation is on agenda 6B is the police department reorganization. This
Mayor?
Presentation and discussion. Oh, what happened?
Well, before we move on,
What?
did we want to look at the Strong Towns Finance Decoder? 7 slides.
Okay, yeah, I didn't have it in my agenda. Okay, yeah, you can do it. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Did you review the number?
How do I get this to share? I've plugged in my HDMI cable.
Ask Scott. One second. Oh,
Okay.
there it is.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
Okay.
So the 2024 audit report and ACFR, help me out. ACFR, yes. Annual Comprehensive Financial Report have recently been released. And these are big documents. Takes a good financial mind to get through them, which is more effort than most people are willing to put in. So the good folks at Strong Towns have put together what they call a finance decoder. So you take some key metrics out of those documents and you plug them into a spreadsheet, and it spits out these lovely graphs that kind of give you at a very high level, how is my city doing? And so I did that for City of Fitchburg, and we have data going back to about 2007. And there's about 7 slides here, and I can talk through them, but I'll encourage all the financial experts in the room to chime in if necessary. First one here is net financial position. So as it says, it's the difference between your assets and your liabilities. So if you've got a thing, you've got an obligation to pay for it. Or you've got many things and obligations to pay for others. And so when this line trends upward, as it is, that indicates that we've got more value in the things that we own than the amount of money that we still owe on all the things we have. So essentially, this means, as it says here, we're in a more sustainable position.
Okay, I want to make a clarification. It doesn't mean that you have it's money and it's cash and fixed assets and and receivable and all of that. So
Okay.
I want to make that because you
Please
say
do.
cash, okay? And
Okay.
it's not cash. So
Financial assets to total liability. So again, it's trending upward, and it's been trending upward a little more slowly than the previous slide, but it's been trending upward for over a decade. So again, it indicates we're in a relatively good position. And this value, the fact that it's over 1 is also significant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we've got more financial assets than we have liabilities. And then total assets to total liabilities. So this is a little flatter, but again, it's trending upward in recent years. And this one is well above 1. This is over 3 now. Net debt to total revenues. So this thing is basically flatlined at 0 in recent years. Yeah, so I guess can either of you explain, because we do have debt, and why is it sitting at 0? Is that my fault, or is that? Yeah, go ahead.
How this model is presented is accurate at 0. What it's saying is that if we took all of our revenue for a year and didn't do anything else with it except pay off debt, we would be able to pay off our debt in full.
Oh, okay.
But we wouldn't be able to operate. So, of course, that would be a problem.
Right, right. Interest to total revenues. So this has been trending downward, which is the correct direction. It's a little choppy, and I suppose that's just because we periodically take out more bonds, right? Or financial notes and accumulate new
Yeah, we
new
don't do it
expenses.
like, we do it like maybe as needed, yes. Yeah, this one.
Net book value to cost of tangible capital assets. So I think this just means all the stuff we've bought, what is it worth today? Looks like about just under 80% of what we paid for, right? And it's been like that back to the beginning of time. Very stable.
Yeah, because we maintain our equipment.
Yes. Government transfers to total revenue. So this is, the total revenue of the city is made up of property taxes and, several other sources of revenue, including intergovernmental transfers. So shared revenue, road aids. What are there other major players in there?
Property taxes, utility bills. Yes.
Okay. And this is very choppy, we think, because maybe this also includes infrastructure that's paid for by developers, and we have spikes in that year by year.
Yep. So this graph is especially hard to put in the right data to get the right data out because how the financial statements are recorded, yes, it includes that capital contributions from developers, which will cause spikes, but then there's also other government aid that we receive that's not included in the numbers that are pulled for this. So this slide in particular, I think, is a little challenging to glean information off of.
And that's actually the last one in the slide deck.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill, for
And
putting this together.
I can email this out to the council.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're done now.
Yes.
So again, I will call the police department. This presentation and discussion will be done by Chief Morales and Deputy Chief Laja. So I invite you to the microphone.
Can you hear me on the mic, Scott? I'm going to start with an opening statement while Matt gets the PowerPoint up and running just to get everybody up to speed. Since our last presentation, there's new alders, and I just want a brief statement to get you all up to speed. I think... who else wasn't here for one of our older presentations? Alder Dantzler, Vafadari, obviously Ladoza wasn't present, and possibly Jetzer. You may have not seen our earlier presentation, so that's I'll get us all started. I took command of the Fitchburg Police Department in October of 2021. The city's population at that time was roughly around 30,000. Our Fitchburg police staff consisted of 54 sworn with 12 full-time civilian members and 7 part-time civilian members. Currently, our city's population is a little over 35,000, and we are soon to receive an update in August. In 2023, the city of Fitchburg was named the fastest growing city in the state. We are still one of the top growing cities today, and on pace to reach 40,000 residents somewhere in the near future, approximately 5 years plus. The staffing growth of the Fitchburg Police Department, however, has been minimal in the last 20 years. That's understandable, however, as growth for the first 20,000 residents spread throughout 34 square miles doesn't really impact law enforcement too much. However, as the city grew with multi-unit apartment complexes and increased traffic, both vehicle and pedestrian, areas of those 34 square miles became denser and the need for police services have increased. Understanding this, in 2022, we drafted a 5-year plan to increase the staffing levels for our police department. This staffing plan is simply to meet the standard of service we provide to the city of Fitchburg. And I want to be clear, this staffing plan is not to reduce crime, as some have mentioned in some social media posts when we talk about staffing for Fitchburg. It's simply to meet the demand of the city needs. 3 years later, and we have only been able to increase our sworn staff by 1. I am not out to blame anyone for this, as the rate of the city's been growing in recent years challenges the ability to increase just overall staffing for the city. The presentation today is about our plan to reorganize our department. The purpose of the reorganization is to have our department run as efficiently as possible, knowing we are not getting additional staff anytime soon. We understand the financial restrictions on the city's budget. We also understand the city's referendum that included additional officers this past fall also failed. The reorganization will not cost the city additional funds. It's merely helping us run the organization more efficient. Lastly, the reorganization plan is not a substitute for our 5-year plan. I want to be clear about that. We'll continue to push the 5-year plan to the city until there are funds that will accommodate it. Please keep in mind that our organization operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's an operation that has several moving pieces with impractical levels of responsibility that can cause points of failure. Matt will start the presentation. I'm sure you will all have questions. I know we all met individually and know most of what the presentation is going to show. I ask that you hold any other questions until the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to present our reorganization plan. So as you all know, we obviously have some challenges and as I see it, some opportunities within the police department and our current staffing levels. To quickly go over the current challenges that we're facing within the police department, obviously we have limited command staff, only 4 command staff members currently, and we haven't added anyone to the command staff since before 2005 when I started. Our span of control for supervision, especially at the command staff for middle management areas, is extremely large, which also increases the communication breakdowns between shifts and supervisors. It's decreased efficiency if a large-scale incident were to occur on off hours, calling in command staff when they could be out of town, could be the middle of the night. It causes delays in the efficiency of running an investigation. Duplication of services, more specifically with our dispatch center, and we'll get into that a little later in the presentation. As I stated before, some communication challenges across shifts, and obviously with our failed referendum, we in the police department need to become a little bit more creative with our staffing to get what we feel as what we need. So some opportunities. We need to reduce our span of control amongst our supervision, specifically our middle management to our command staff, increase efficiency, increase officer availability, improve our communication across all shifts and command staff, and obviously we still have federal and state funding opportunities available to us. So if we go back in time to the Baker-Tilly Emerging Priorities study that we had done a couple years ago, their recommendation 15 was to review the command structure of the police department. Thankfully, we have reclassified the two captains, the previous two lieutenants to captains, to open up that gap between the sergeant and the captain position to allow us the opportunity to insert that next layer of command structure as the lieutenant or shift lieutenant. So that is what our next step is and the point of this reorganization. Additionally, as the chief referred to before, we should still continue to use our internal staffing analysis projections as a working document for the city. So as this is our current sworn staffing as it stands today. We have 50 of 55 positions filled. We are down one member of the command staff, and we are currently operating with 4 officer vacancies.
I want to add on this piece, if you look at the command, go back. Go ahead. Oh, the slide goes out. If you look at the slide, the update there with one missing command structure, most of you know that one as Ned Hardwick, who recently resigned. I want you to know when we're talking about these positions that we want to add, that position has been occupied by 3 individuals shortly before I came. One had taken a demotion. I promoted one individual to that position that was there for a short period, took a demotion, and now with Ned, that's the 3rd, and I was told there was one prior to me coming onto the department. So we're looking at 4 people who occupied that position. The point I'm trying to make about that position is the positions we're going to talk about that we're creating will alleviate some of the stress onto the both captains' positions. 4 people leaving that position within the past 5 years is telling you that the demand on those positions is very heavy. And to have people leave, we're setting people up for failure instead of success within the organization.
So moving on. So here is our current organizational structure as it stands today. Obviously the chief, deputy chief, some of our professional staff, and as you go further down the command structure, you can see that the operations captain and the support captain are the 2 anchors on both sides of the department who are in charge of the supervision and management of both sides, both the support services side and the operations side, which is the patrol side.
So again, not to get too much in this organizational chart, but when you view that, just to give you a different perspective, the operation captain is overseeing 3 shifts. And as I stated in our opening, we operate 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The communication that goes to that captain, that's one of the stressors for that patrol captain is they're fielding calls, sometimes staying late, sometimes coming in over the weekends or nights. You're literally on call, and they're being overutilized for that because there is nobody that commands each individual shift. So that's for the operations captain. The support captain also funnels the same stress because that support captain oversees the support that is needed amongst those 3 shifts. So again, when they're fielding calls, they're taking information from 3 different shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Those 2 positions need to find what we'll be explaining later, the support that is going to help them manage the 3 shifts that we have.
And not to mention the support captain is also in charge of directly supervising all 5 of our detectives who are in charge of all of our very serious cases intense, in-depth investigations. One thing to note that we did add the executive assistant position, the professional staff, which she does lend a lot of support to my position as well as the operation, or both of the captain's positions in a lot of administrative duties. So as we go into the reorganization of the police department, we kind of broke this down into two phases. We have the sworn phase and we have the professional side phase. All of them they run together. So our intent is to add a sergeant of detectives position on the support side, which would be in charge of supervising all 5 detectives, and then it alleviates the number of direct reports to the support captain by 4 because they would only be responsible to the sergeant of detectives at that point. In the operations side, we'd add in initially the evening lieutenant. However, with the detective sergeant and the evening lieutenant position, we are going to be converting 3 police officer, currently vacant police officer positions to those 2 supervisor and command staff positions. Moving.
So the blue, for the people to understand, so the blue one are the proposed
are the
additions.
changes.
Okay.
Proposed changes, correct. So moving to phase 2 of the reorganization, it's more the professional staff side. Right now we have our own dispatch center, and that dispatch center has 4 full-time dispatchers assigned to it. We're out of all of the dispatch centers throughout Dane County, we are one of the poorly staffed dispatch centers. It's the only part of our department that in my 20 years we have ever lost a position in. So needless to say, it's either we staff greatly, add quite a few dispatchers to that position, or we get creative with those 4 positions, completely recognizing that Dane County right now is our 911 center that we utilize in all of the county. Right now, our dispatch center does not answer 911 calls. While we do answer non-emergency calls, all 911 calls start at the 911 comm center. All of those calls are entered and then transferred to our dispatchers. So in a sense, 911's doing almost half the job and then transferring those calls to our dispatch center. We, in the last couple years, have relied heavily on the 911 center because of some staffing challenges that we've had in dispatch, and we have transferred those services or utilized 911 on several occasions with no interruption of service to our department or to our community. So we feel as if now is the time to utilize those 4 dispatchers in a much more creative way, in a much more efficient way for our department, and allowing the 911 center to handle all of our calls for service and all of our dispatching from here on out. We would take those 4 dispatch positions and consolidate them down into 2 support service specialists. Currently, we have 3 full-time record specialists. Those 3 full-time record specialists would also be reclassified to a support service specialist 2 position, and then we would take 2 of our existing dispatch positions and turn those into a support service 1 position and a support service 3 position. The support service 3 position would become our property evidence specialist. Currently, we have officers and sergeants taken off the road in order to maintain our evidence facility. In most cases, we cannot dedicate large amounts of time from a staffing perspective to put officers in the evidence room to purge evidence, process evidence, run evidence to and from our crime lab. So if we had that full-time property evidence specialist, that would alleviate a lot of the workload currently being taken care of by our officers and our sergeants, and it would allow them to actually do what they're supposed to do, answering calls, being there for the community, and then from the sergeant perspective, being on calls to ensure that officers have what they need and are doing what they need for the community.
I just want to add that the removal of the dispatch center, what we're doing with that staff or reclassifying those positions is to create as much support that we can for our officers so that our officers can remain out on the street. In addition to that, internally, that support, our sworn, we currently have a captain and a sergeant that do a lot of data pulls. And if anybody knows the mayor that we have for the city currently, she asks for a lot of data. And she's demanding on data. And I often say it's not that we don't know how to do it. It takes time. It takes some labor to do that, and we're taking sworn people from their normal duties to do that. If we could train some of our civilian staff to help with data pulls or when questions come up, we would have much more support and at the end to keep our sworn to do what they're supposed to do and be out in the street to service our community.
That's a question. So here in phase 2, I think you need to keep blue the evening lieutenant and the sergeant of detective because they are part. You know what I mean?
Just wait for the last slide.
Next slide.
They're all turned
okay.
blue again.
Oh, they are all
Yes.
blue?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's coming.
Okay. I have a question. I will say instead of, you mentioned that with the dispatch, the idea is to cease operation.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
With the support service specialist one, their role would be a Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock a.m. to 4 p.m. roughly,
Okay.
to answer non-emergency calls for service, to interact with people that would just come to the police department for, they need some assistance from an officer, they need a report, they have questions. So they're also going to be there during regular business hours. They're not going to be dispatching, they're not going to be taking calls from 911 or those types of things, but they are going to be there in some function or some variation of their current function as a dispatcher. So aside from the dispatch positions and the new 2 support service specialist positions that we would consolidate them down to, the reduction of the 4 dispatchers would also allow the department, which currently has a part-time social worker, it would allow that social worker to now become full-time. And she has been a very big help for the police department as far as follow-up for domestic victims, follow-up for a lot of our mental health-related calls. Additionally, our court liaison would then be reassigned to a support services supervisor. She is currently overseeing the record specialist positions currently, and she would still maintain her court liaison position. However, she would then have that direct supervision supervisor title for her position as well. So moving on to the final reorganization, there's the blue back for you, Mayor. As you can see, this reorg with our current staffing, again, this is all of our current staffing, it does not add any levels of, or add any additional bodies to our police department. We would have the reduction of the 3 officers, giving us the evening lieutenant and the sergeant of detectives. The reduction of the 4 dispatchers would give us the support services supervisor, the 2 additional support service specialists, which does include the property and evidence specialist and the full-time social worker. This reorganization improves our efficiency across all 3 shifts, not to the level that we want it, but much more efficient than we currently have it. It reduces the span of control, especially for the captain positions. It increases officer accountability by allowing the sergeants, especially on the 2nd and the 3rd shift, to be out on the road instead of having to come back constantly for administrative style duties that can get transferred to that evening lieutenant, and it increases our accountability across all aspects of our police department. So the largest impact of this plan is the impact on our current dispatch positions, because those are the areas where we would actually either in time or almost immediately lose employees. So the two options that we are going to present to council are option one, which is losing those positions through attrition. So in that plan, all current dispatch positions will become support service specialists. Each would be assigned to one of the three categories, either support specialist 1, 2, or 3, and then the department would not fill 2 vacant positions if and when 2 of those dispatchers would leave. And we do have some level of indication that there could be some dispatchers with this change of shift would probably need to leave due to other issues outside of the police department. The option one of attrition may delay the completion of the plan or impact officer staffing as well, depending on the financial outlook from Misty. So option two is we run an application process. All current dispatchers can apply for the 2 support service specialist positions that we would have available to them. If they're qualified, 2 would be retained to fill the 2 support service specialist positions. Additional financial expectations may be placed on the city, i.e. unemployment, insurance. However, it does accelerate the reorganization plan.
I just want to mention that option 2 would be our preferred method, just because we're trying to get moving. If this reorganization gets approved, and there's some very important pieces that we need to, we really need to get moving on, and we would hope that we could get started this fall. Promotional processes, application processes, training, that all takes time. Just the process in itself, it could take you got your 2 weeks of posting, interviews, process, then getting the approval through the Police and Fire Commission. It's going to take a couple of months in itself, and we would really like to get moving. Option 2 would be the preferred request.
So obviously, as the chief alluded to, this reorganization plan does not modify our needs as a department to be able to serve the community, this very diverse and very rapidly growing community. As we can see for our staffing comparisons as it currently stands within Dane County and in the state of Wisconsin, Fitchburg, again, ranks extremely low in the staffing per capita range at third from the bottom on Dane County, and last in the state of Wisconsin for municipalities between 30,000 and 50,000 residents. So looking forward, obviously the police department is going to maintain the 5-year staffing plan. Additional staffing requests for future needs and growth, specifically to continue requests for additional lieutenant positions in the hopes to get that lieutenant position on all 3 shifts. And then obviously we still have grant opportunities available to us, namely the COPS grant, which does expire in 2028. However, we do have the option as a city to be able to request extensions for that grant. However, we would most likely have to do it by 2027. I'll open it up for questions.
Okay, so I want to make as an accountant that I am, this plan is missing a big piece, and is how much it's going to cost. And this is a question that I think fellow alders and people are going to say. So can you explain how much it's going to cost? I know, but I want you to tell the people.
We know Misty was going to be here.
Yeah.
But the way we plan this we've been planning this the last 6 months, is that it doesn't cost anything. We're basically giving up some positions to gain positions.
So it's going to be cost neutral.
Correct.
But there are some things that we need to.
If I can jump in.
Yeah.
So yes, there's still some unanswered questions.
Yes.
Namely, Deputy Chief Leahy mentioned about the two options as far as how we implement this plan. Which option is preferred by council has a different financial implication and a different, I guess, puzzle piece for how we'll make sure that this whole thing works, and we are all committed to it being cost neutral when you look at an entire year.
What about there is a 10-county levy transfer? Can you explain that?
Yep. So levy limits, we all know levy limits are constraining us. There is an adjustment on there for transfer of services. So when a municipality takes on a transfer of service, they add money to their levy limit. If a community reduces that transfer of service, they would have to take a negative. We are of the opinion that this would not qualify as a transfer of service, but we're still working through some of those details with everybody just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're not surprised by something in the future.
And just to add the transfer of services, we already have days that we can't staff dispatch, and the county dispatches for us. So they are doing that. And how many hours do we have this year so far?
I know in 2024, we had over 500 hours that we had transferred over to the county. And again, with no interruption to services for our officers as well as our community.
And I anticipate that to grow after the presentation and our dispatchers knowing what our intentions are, that number is going to increase.
Okay, so I want to say something and then open. So I think I want to thank you, Chief, because I think you have been very creative of looking for solution. And I want to mention to the Common Council member and the people that are watching, this is another consequences of a no referendum. Because we couldn't, and the referendum didn't pass, so we didn't have the option to hire 5 new police officers, and this is impacting, how the police department is, is working, and this is why you came out with this. Okay, we need this lieutenant at this. What is
Detective Sergeant, Lieutenant,
and this is very important, and how we're going to do it. And I think this is great. You look for solution. So I want to say thank you to you and Matt that have been working on this. So the question to you is, what do you want from us? We need. I'm going to open for question, but what is you're looking for the council?
The approval to move forward with the reorganization. I think the lieutenant and the detective sergeant is the easiest part. The civilian piece, because there are some unknowns, I would like the approval to move forward with the civilian portion. That's the phase 2. The second option, because we really want to move forward, all of this whole piece is, in essence, gets us to support our frontline officers to be out on the street, to get our sergeants to help coach and mentor our frontline officers out on the street versus doing the ton of administrative duties that are forced for the accountability part of this job. There's a ton of admin duties that we do inside, and we need those layers to help so that our frontline gets the support they need out on the field.
Okay, so we know where so I'm going to open, and I would like all of you to participate, council member, because we need to have an idea how we are going to move forward and what type of resolution that we need to move forward in July. July, is it? August? August? Okay. Okay, so who's going to be first? Gabriela. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, just want to say I support this this proposal fully, and I think option 2 is the way to go. And I appreciate you saying that that's your preference. I also want to commend you all for the hard work you've done to figure this out in a way that looks to be cost neutral. I can't imagine that's anything short of a Herculean effort on top of all the other things you do. So thank you for taking the time to do that. It is so important. And I know that evening lieutenant officer, I remember hearing a lot about that back when we discussed the Baker-Tilly study a couple of years ago, and when we originally started talking about that 5-year staffing plan that remains a need. So I really appreciate that you're able to get that position in place under this reorganization. I think it's very clever. The understaffing in the department and just the stress on you all is a big concern for me. It's one of the reasons why I was hoping that the referendum would pass and was quite disappointed when it didn't. Obviously it affects multiple parts of the city operations, but I know for the police department, given how burdened you all are and with the overtime, it's a lot. So we know that, I know that, and want to make sure that we are able to move towards addressing it, but with the levy limits we face, with the funding sources, as we just talked about with the Eldridge presentation earlier. And as you all know, the funding for more staff in the general operating budget is just not there right now. Hope it will be there through some means in the future. But in the meantime, I think this is a great solution to increase efficiency and really fully support it. And thank you for putting the time in to make this possible and bring it to us. I don't know if we need an official resolution or if an informal conversation tonight is enough, but would be happy to kind of have that a formal resolution come through council, in the next couple of meetings, or maybe even next meeting, if feasible, so that we can make that happen.
Yeah, Gabriela, we are working on that, but we need to have the feedback from the council first, okay? So this is what I want every one of you to give me, to provide your opinion about this, so to have an idea how we are going to draft that resolution. Okay, Logan, and then Bill. Okay.
So I have a number of questions, the former journalist in me, of course, and just want to say again, echo what Alder Gerhardt said, and just thank you for the creativity and the, coming up with the solution that is, within the budget of $0. So and I appreciate, Chief, since you and I met and we kind of went through this before, I think this is a smart way to go. I guess I just want to make sure is first see if you've had any conversations with Dane County to see if they believe they can absorb the additional strain that this would put on them, given that, they're already doing quite a bit. But if we're going to put this additional work on them, I just want to make sure that we aren't, that we're doing so with their support, or at least their begrudging acceptance, if nothing else.
No, perfectly. Great question. We've been in conversation with the county communication center since I believe last fall. Internally, one of our captains who left, Ned Hardwick, was having conversations, and it even escalated to the city administrator, Captain Leahy, and Misty was part of those conversations. So we've elevated it to different levels within the county. We're sitting here confident, although we can't tell you 100% certainty, but we're sitting confident that it'll come out cost neutral.
Okay. My next question then, with the reorganization of the kind of patrol officer positions, having the evening lieutenant so that the sergeants can stay on the road, do we anticipate then that would essentially be about the same number of hours people on the road in that evening shift, which is kind of the more peak time for call volume, if I understand correctly?
Right. The shift lieutenant, which we will call it, there should be 3, 1 per shift. We're got to start off somewhere, so we're starting with 1, and that'll be an offset during the nighttime hours. Ultimately, when we have 3, we'll have full coverage all the way through the weekends. For that person. That is an administrative position to keep the sergeants out. So, for example, review of reports, review of just accreditation items, internal pieces, if there's a complaint against an officer, the things that keep a sergeant inside will be handled by that officer in charge. In addition, if there's a major incident or a felony crime that needs to be reviewed, that's going to be should be your most experienced person, where the street level supervisor and officer can bounce that information off of. Did we check out each, are the boxes checked on this investigation? Do we need to do more before you come in and write reports? Or do we need to call in a detective in the evening hours? The detectives are There's only 5 of them, so they're not working 24/7, and on the weekends they're on call. I'm stressing our detective staff out even more because I need their leadership as far as their experience when it comes to investigations to help out our front line. The frontline officer is the one that responds to anything and everything. They're the first one on scene to determine what do we have? Have we met the elements of this crime? Have we met the elements, or is there a basis to sometimes arrest? Some of the cases are easy and simple, but then there's some complicated ones where there has to be a thought, and you need that elevated person that's going to be able to handle that and handle a major incident while the resources that are going to be called in from home at night can make it there. Somebody has to be able to at least control that scene.
Going a little bit deeper on your question, Alder, the fact that we're going, no police department ever wants to exchange 3 officers and eliminate 3 officers in just to get or create 2 positions. Our staffing levels back in 2022 were at a historic low. We were at 18 patrol vacancies. So just to lose 3 officers it would not impact to that degree how many officers are going to be assigned to those shifts. So we're going to still maintain our minimum staffing on all of our shifts, even despite the fact that we're going to kind of change those 3 officer positions to supervisor and command staff levels.
Okay. And I just want to say, I noticed the importance of this position myself when I went on a ride along it might be a month or 2 ago now. And the sergeant that I was riding along with had answered in a couple hour period, would respond to multiple calls from, some of the patrol officers who it seems like we have a younger police force than, which I believe, Chief, you've mentioned to me before. So, having that person while they're out on a ride along, and also, we're running radar and all the things trying to get done while also juggling that seems like no small feat. And I think from the sake of efficiency and not burning out staff, I think that's a great reorganization option. One of the other, or I guess I have 2 more quick questions. One of them about the police facility then. If we move away from the dispatch, the dispatchers in our department, what do we do with any plans in the new facility for that space, for the equipment? Can we just cut our budget a little bit, or absorb some of the other costs that way, or what does that look like in terms of the capital across the street here when shovels get in the dirt?
Right, that's 2 things that you're looking forward to our next future presentation. There was some money savings in the building, just under $500,000 we had already removed those dispatch councils. So the room is still there. The councils will not be in the new facility, and that saved us. So that money has already been reallocated to other areas of the building. But there is a need for that piece. It's another presentation. It's going to take, I don't think I can explain it in a few minutes, but we're looking at, it was brought, believe it or not, I got to give credit to Alder Herbst who brought this question when we brought up staffing back in 2022 at our committee of the whole. And he made a comment, what technology can you bring to the table that can help with staffing? The technology with artificial intelligence, the technology with the amount of camera systems we have throughout the city and things of that nature, and even what we're actually going to be experimenting with some AI software to help us. It's real-time information for our officers that can get the information to the officers even prior to their arrival to a scene. We're working on that technology. I'm working on how that's going to be funded through outside sources, because it's not so much the technology, it's like a cell phone, the service that you pay for the technology every year. I've been campaigning for that as well, but that's the second presentation. You know what I'll try to do is send you a link to that type of technology and what will be, that room will be occupied after our presentation today, and I will hope that in the future, before we get to that, if we're successful, that we can present that to the future committee of the whole.
Wonderful. And then I'll make my last one. I'll try to wrap up here on the human side of things. Excuse me, losing my voice here. As we kind of talked about, we have a younger police force, and then we have some folks who have been here for quite a while, and then we lose, somebody like Captain Hartwick. I think of all the costs that go into, recruiting and retaining. So do you foresee this helping with retention and providing some of those opportunities for folks to move up so that, somebody who's a sergeant can move to the lieutenant, then one of the more experienced patrol officers can move up, and we can kind of keep folks in Fitchburg, in our department, for a longer period so that we don't have to deal with some of that turnover, the attrition, and, also just support professional growth and development for our police force as well.
Absolutely, and it is a natural progression to do it that way. I think the way we have it now, as I indicated, the 4 members that had difficulty in this position is because we don't have the multiple positions, that lieutenant position. There's a natural progression, and part of that natural progression is to gain experience. At each level, there's added responsibility, but you're also looking at the problems through different lenses. So you need these different levels, and as you move up, that experience helps you get to that next step. Without these steps, it's almost like promoting somebody from a sergeant level, a detective level, police officer level, to the positions that we have right now at Camden is such a huge jump that they're not given the ability to grow into that position, and they become overwhelmed. So you're correctly right. We need that position to help the growth. There's a lot of talent on the department. We're very, very young. And by adding these positions and creating some time, you're going to see some great leaders in this organization.
Thank you. So now we move to Bill.
Logan asked nearly all the questions. So I guess just to restate, the effect on the new police facility is that there is some savings in furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. The room will be there so that if at some point in the future we want to bring dispatch back, we have that option, or no?
We won't have that because we won't have the
consoles.
The consoles that are needed. Those are expensive, and I think those are part of the expenses, the hardwiring it into the office. So I think once we're done, it's going to be very, very difficult to bring it back.
Okay. Well, again, I'll just kind of echo Alder Gerhardt's remarks. This is, creative thinking. You're taking the perennial vacancy position lemons and making lemonade out of them, and I think that's to be commended. And so I don't know if we've said up until now explicitly how many positions do you think will be filled by existing staff, and how many are we going to try and fill from outside, and how difficult do we think that's going to be?
As far as this reorganization, I feel as if for the detective sergeant and for the lieutenant, the evening lieutenant or shift lieutenant position, we'd be able to fill those from our current staffing.
Excellent.
And obviously both of the additional support services positions, I believe we'll be able to fill with our current dispatchers, so long as they're willing to take on those new added roles, responsibilities, different shift, working more hours in a typical year than they're used to. I think all of these added positions with this reorganization plan could be achieved through our current staff.
Okay, awesome. And then I guess one other question. So option 1 versus option 2 for the dispatchers. So we got four positions there now. Are any of them close to retirement? Is that why option 1 was listed? We were going to go by attrition. Walk us through that just a little bit. Is there anybody itching to retire soon?
Option 1 is simply because of the difficulty of having to let members go from the organization. That's why option 1 is there. Option 2, we're going to have to let some members go, but it allows the department to move forward and get towards the reorganization where we need to be for efficiency.
Okay. But overall, those would be the only 2 positions. everybody else you can hire from within.
Yes.
Okay.
That's it? Okay, thank you. So next I'm going to move to Micah and then to Donna.
Yeah, hey, I mean, I will generally echo what everyone else said here tonight. I really appreciate you bringing this forward. I mean, I fully support the organization plan. I think I really appreciate all the work that went into it, all the thought that went into it. There's certainly a scenario where the council and the police department just continued to fight about staffing levels and things like that. And you guys came up with creative solutions, and I really appreciate that. I would also support option 2. I mean, if that's what you prefer. If there is any sort of financial implication, I'd kind of want to see that first, just to make sure that the cost difference between the two options is minimal. But yeah, fully support it. My one question would just be around the elimination of kind of essentially the non-emergency line. I know you said that there would be some sort of non-emergency line staffed Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. I just wonder, are we receiving a lot of non-emergency calls outside of that time? And if so, like, do we need to have any sort of communication plan to the public about how they should be contacting the police department once this moves forward?
So luckily, we have a very well-established phone tree and communication system already in place with 911. So in the event that we did need to transfer our dispatch services up to the county, our phone tree is in place, where if they were to call our typical non-emergency line, it would immediately get transferred to the 911 center. So there would be no disruption in services. Somebody calling the police, even for a non-emergency, would still have the capabilities of speaking with somebody, and if they did need to speak with somebody that was currently on staff working on shift, they'd be able to get that call transferred out to that person. And if they needed something that was more business hours related, like requesting a report, they would just be asked to call back in the morning. They would be able to answer those calls for community members that would call after hours.
So what you're saying that the community will not feel any impact on this?
That's correct. There would be no impact.
Okay. Then Donald. Micah, do you have another question? Sorry, Micah, do you have another question or no? No? Okay.
No, I'm good. Don can go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm in support, as everybody else has said, especially with the second option. A lot of these questions were discussed when Chief and I met. I'm in support again. Just would like to see, I think Micah hit on it, if there is going to be a cost difference that's calculated at some point to let us know. But in the interim, I think this is a good idea and a temporary solution to one of the problems that you all are having until we can kind of get things rolling.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
So the cost difference between kind of option 1 and option 2, I don't think it's necessarily a cost difference. I think it's a timing difference. Mm-hmm. So if we go with option 2, we're able to implement more of the reorganization plan immediately, as opposed to having to kind of phase it out. So the cost should be basically the same. It's just a matter of how fast the other pieces could fit in.
Okay. Gabriela, do you have another question?
Yeah, just one more thing. So in terms of speed, and I know this is a question that is like, we don't know for sure yet, but if you go with option 2 and we move this forward, I know that requires creating position descriptions, doing hiring processes, all of those different items. Is this something that we could see happen before the end of the calendar year, or are we looking at something in calendar year 2026?
Yeah, I was hoping for the end of the presentation, but I wanted to thank 2 people for this, and that's Misty and Sarah, who's not here, Sarah Olson. We've been working on this since the beginning of the year. So the job descriptions are there. We really put some stress on Misty. It's bad enough that she's got all the numbers that she has to do for the city, and this was an extra project for her. So we thank them both, but those items have already been done. So as soon as this approval by the council is provided to us, we can move forward. Misty, what did you say, as early as September?
Yep. So I guess next process steps would be, this is kind of a head nod conversation. Where is council at? what are you open to us as staff presenting in the resolution? But we do need to get a resolution officially through council, which would be a budget amendment authorizing the change in headcount, all of those things. The position descriptions would have to be classified and go through personnel committee. So there are some kind of process things that would have to happen. But if we can move this through relatively quickly, I think we're ready to go. We just need to go through those procedural steps.
Okay. Do you have another question? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. I'm really happy, and thanks so much for all the work that was put into this before we talked about it. That's no small feat. My next question is, in regards to the new rules around shared revenue, the increased shared revenue with the continuity of service, I can't remember what it's called. Do we have concerns about that with the change in headcount?
Oh,
I
yeah,
may.
go ahead.
So maintenance of effort is what you're talking about. Yep. So because of the shifting of the costs within still sworn positions for the most part, and because of other just cost escalators that we've seen in our sworn staff, I don't have a concern with that overall, but it's something that we will continue to monitor. And then also keeping in mind the 3 vacancies or the 3 positions that will go unfilled in order to pay for these additional positions are already vacant and so are already out of that calculation. So it's not like we're taking away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Makes sense. Okay. Any other question, comments? No? Okay. So I would say thank you, Chief. Thank you, Deputy Chief, for coming today. I think this is, as I mentioned, this is a creative way to looking for solution. Unfortunately, we don't have any other choice, but I commend for looking, outside the box and say how we can move forward with the position that we need, with the resources that we have. So, yeah.
It looks like Alder Gerhardt has another
Yeah,
question.
okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I have one more statement too, because I know that there's a lot of positive talk here as well, but I think it also is just worth saying that we also understand that this is not enough. I know you've made that point multiple times, but also there's an understanding that this is just the beginning of changes that need to happen and not the end. But this is one nice step, but understand that there is still a need and there are lots of calls that come in that had to be responded to. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we are under item 7, announcement. So our next committee of the whole meeting will be July 23rd, 2025. Do you want to say something? No? And also I want to, tomorrow is a holiday here in the city and in the country, so tomorrow City Hall will be closed. Happy Juneteenth to everyone. And any other announcement? Gabriela, do you have one or no?
Just wanted to say for the July meeting, it looks like I believe we're gonna do a budget presentation. Misty, correct me if I'm wrong. And then I think we may also be having a discussion about housing as well. So we'll release the final lineup once we know, but that's the current tentative plan.
Okay, thank you. So I need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning the meeting say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned at 8:32. Thank you. Buenas noches.